So good afternoon, everybody. My name's Kitty Robinson, and I'm a Veterinary Investigation Officer at the Carmarthen VI Centre. Today I'm going to talk to you about our results from the free testing for sheep scab in Wales that was held last winter. So the testing that was undertaken was examination of skin scrapes for ectoparasites from sheep showing clinical signs of scab. This was offered free of charge from December 2021 to March 2022 and was funded by the Welsh Government. Testing was carried out at our parasitology lab at the Carmarthen VI Centre, and we also designed an epidemiological questionnaire that we asked vets to fill in with their farmers and submit alongside the samples. Previous similar projects have been held over winters 2020 to 2021 and 2017-2018. So just a recap over sheep scab. It is caused by infestation with the mite Sauroptes ovis. This is a non-burrowing mite that's just about visible to the naked eye, but you can't rely on that for an accurate diagnosis. It's the mite feces that causes an allergic dermatitis on the animal, and this is what results in the classic clinical signs that we associate with scab, such as itchiness, so rubbing against objects, wool pulling, nibbling, as well as wool loss and scabbing on the skin. Sheep scab is a severe welfare issue, and infestations in flocks can lead to significant production losses. It's highly transmissible between sheep, and the mite can also live in the environment for up to 17 days, which makes disease difficult. As well as causing these classic clinical signs, early infestation can also result in a subclinical infection, which means that sheep can have live mites living on them without showing any outward signs. Again, this makes diagnosis and control difficult. The disease is endemic in the UK, and research done back in 2004 estimated around 7,000 cases of sheep scab per year. The control and eventual eradication of sheep scab is a long-standing priority of the Wales Animal Health and Welfare Framework Group. So the testing that was done was examination of either skin scrapes taken from the animal or wool taken close from the skin with scab material adhered to it, as can be seen in the photo on the left. The sample was then examined under the microscope in order to try and identify the characteristic Sauroptes ovis mites, which can be seen there on the right-hand side. If mites were not seen under direct microscopy, then a potassium hydroxide digest was undertaken. This helps to identify mites if they're present in low numbers or if they're hidden in scab material, and therefore increases the sensitivity of the test. This set of results are an example submission from our project. So we have 3 samples from 3 different animals, and this helps to show the benefit of undertaking the potassium hydroxide digest. So you can see there that no parasites were identified in sample 1 under direct microscopy, but after the potassium hydroxide digest, Sauroptes mites were seen. So if that hadn't have been done, that would have been a false negative. They also demonstrate the benefit of sampling more than one animal in a group, because live mites were seen on both samples 2 and 3, so that helped to confirm an active infection in that flock. So when we look at the results, we received 33 submissions between the 13th of December and the 31st of March. Of those, 57.6% were positive for sheep scab, and the next most common parasite diagnosed was lice due to Bovicola ovis in 7 submissions, so 21.2%. This demonstrates the importance of getting an accurate diagnosis, because the clinical signs that can be displayed due to infection with scab or infection with lice can be very similar, whereas the treatment is different for the 2 parasites. So farmers need to be aware which parasite they're dealing with. 7 submissions, so again 21.2% had no ectoparasites detected. And in the scope of this project, we weren't doing any testing for other skin diseases. So when we compare the results to previous years, they're very similar. So in all 3 years where the free testing was run, ectoparasitic disease due to sheep scab was the most common diagnosis. And then secondly, the most common ectoparasite diagnosed was lice, and in around 20 to 40% of submissions, there were no ectoparasites detected. In previous years, we found concurrent infections with scab mites and another ectoparasite, and that's usually lice. You can see in the table at the bottom there that the number of submissions we received this year was much lower compared to previous years. Now, we don't know the full reason for this. Potentially it was because of the requirement for the questionnaire to be filled in and submitted, which may have put vets and farmers off from submitting to the project. We do know that private practices will do microscopy for sheep scab in-house and potentially may also send samples to other private labs. So the epidemiological questionnaire consisted of 10 questions with sub-questions within them. And these covered treatment history, scab history in the flock, biosecurity risk factors such as common grazing or contact with sheep from other flocks, for example, at boundaries. And it also covered quarantine protocols. So whether isolation periods were used and/or quarantine treatments were used when sheep were being brought into the flock or returning to the flock. So once the questionnaire answers had been compiled, statistical analysis using chi-squared tests was undertaken to compare the submissions which had tested positive or negative for sheep scab and how they had answered the treatment and biosecurity questions. So of the 10 questions, only 2 returned statistically significant outputs, and I'll go on to talk about those in a moment. The full report is available on the COEEML Vet Gateway, and this goes into much more detail into all of the questionnaire responses if you're interested in having a read of that. So the first question, which showed a significant difference between positive and negative submissions, was whether the sampled sheep had been treated with a product active against sheep scab or not. So of the 15 submissions in which the sampled sheep had been treated with a product active against scab, 13 of those, so 86.7%, were positive for scab mites. This was significantly different to the 18 submissions where sampled sheep had not been treated for scab, of which only 6, so 33.3%, were positive for Psoroptes ovis mites. Similarly, when asked if organophosphate dips had been used in the flock in the last 12 months or not, 9 of the 10 submissions, so 90%, which had said yes, they had used OP dip, tested positive for scab, compared to only 43.5% of the 23 submissions where they had not used an OP dip in the past, testing positive for scab, which was significantly different. So when we were considering these results, we decided that it likely showed that where sheep scab treatment had been used, it was probably correctly associated with a sheep scab infection in the flock. So this raised the question of why were we still detecting mites post-treatment? So in many cases, there was a significant time delay between the treatment being given and the sampling being undertaken. So in those cases, we could determine that the treatment persistence would have ended, and so it's likely these sheep had become reinfected. In cases where we would still have expected the treatment to be persisting by the time of sampling, then other factors may have played a role in why we were still detecting mites despite treatment. So these could include incorrect application of the treatment, perhaps that the entire flock had not been treated, or potentially there was a lack of treatment efficacy. In these cases, there was not enough management information available to determine which of these factors resulted in us still detecting Sauroptes ovis mites. And where we were concerned that potentially there was a lack of treatment efficacy, then this was referred back to the private vets for them to investigate further with their farmers in order to potentially highlight if there was treatment resistance in the flock. So we also had a look at the geographical distribution of samples, and these 4 maps show the periods of free testing. So the map on the far left is testing between 2017 and 2018, and then the 2 maps on the far right were the free testing periods between 2020 and 2021 and 21 to 2022. I've put the second map in for comparison. So this was a winter where there was no free testing offered, so the submissions came in under our normal diagnostic testing service. So the red hexagons demonstrates samples which were positive for scab, and the green hexagons are samples which were negative for scab. So if we look at the map on the far right, this is our most recent project. So you can see the number of submissions overall was much reduced to the other years where there was free testing, and it was more similar to the year where we didn't offer free testing. But it does help to demonstrate that sheep scab is prevalent across all of Wales. So I'll just finish up by saying that we are still offering free examination of skin scrapes, and this is now being offered all year round rather than just in the winter months. This is again being funded by the Welsh Government, and the testing is the free ectoparasite exam. So we're asking for samples from sheep that are showing suspect signs of scab, and they have to be on farms in Wales. We ask that they're accompanied by a submission form with clinical history, including treatment history, but we're not asking for a questionnaire to be completed this time. So samples can be posted directly to Carmarthen VI Centre, and vets can also use our online ADTS submission portal. So thank you for your attention. I'd just like to acknowledge the practitioners and their clients who submitted to this project, and my APHA colleagues who helped with the write-up of this report. And if you've got any questions, then please feel free to email me. Thank you.